video, we'll cover how to factor quadratic equations when the value in front of your squared x is 1. And so we're going to be practicing factoring expressions in the form x squared plus bx plus c. So for now, we're not going to worry about if there's any number in front of the x squared. We're just going to assume it's 1, and then there's going to be different numbers for b and c. Just to review, factoring is the reverse of expanding. So if we have this expression where we have x plus 3 times x plus 7, we would expand or use the distributive property in order to write this form. X squared plus 10x plus 21. And to kind of visualize that, you may have seen this strategy where we're going to multiply the first to get x squared, the outside to get 7x, the inside to get 3x, and then the last to get the 21. And when you combine the 7x and the 3x, that's where this 10x comes from. Well, factoring is going the opposite direction. So going from the x squared plus 10x plus 21 version of this expression back to the x plus 3 times x plus 7 version. And so this takes a little bit of a process, but it's not too bad once you notice some patterns. So the pattern you may notice here is that the 10 is made up of 3 plus 7, and then the 21 was made up of 3 times 7, and then the 3 and the 7 are used in the factored form. So in order to factorize, we're coming up with two numbers that multiply to make the constant. Okay, so we want to multiply to make a c, the c value, and then add to make the b value, the coefficient of x, so that b value. So really, we're just looking, and if we know our math facts of multiplication and we can do quick addition, this process starts to become pretty quick. Sometimes it does take some guessing and checking, especially when negative numbers are involved, but if we can determine what multiplies to c and adds to b and find that pair, then we are on our way to finding the factored form. So we're going to start with this example. So we have x squared plus 9x plus 14. So I want to know what are the different factors of 14? That's what I like to start with. I organize my work in a table. You don't have to. You might be able to do this mentally, but it's just nice to list it out. So what multiplies to 14? Well, there's always 1 and 14. There's also 2 and 7. Now, in this case, we don't have to worry about it, but remember there's also negatives that'll work. For example, negative 1 times negative 14 also makes a positive 14. And then negative 2 and negative 7 also makes a positive 14 when multiplied. So you might have to consider those negatives in some cases. In this case, we don't need to, but just keep in mind that there are multiple ways to get to a positive 14. And so now that we have all the possibilities listed, we want to know, well, which one of these also adds to this value, to the 9? And if I look, there's this one option right here. 2 plus 7 equals 9. And so I'm going to write my factored form. X. Now these are both positive numbers, so it's going to be x plus 2 and x plus 7. And that's it. That's my factored form. Now what's nice is you can always check using the distributive property. And you might get good enough to where this can be done mentally, but just as a quick check, my first is x squared, my outer is 7x, my inner is a 2x, and then my last is the 14. And then if I add these two middle terms, there's my 9x. So I can always factor, I can always use the distributive property to check if my factored form truly is correct. So since it is the same as my starting expression, I know that this is the correct answer. Moving on to this equation here. Here we're adding in some negatives, so we do have a little bit more to consider. We have x squared minus 3x equal, or minus 10. And so I want to know, what are the ways I can get to negative 10? I can do a positive 1 and a negative 10. I can do a negative 1 and a positive 10. I could also do a positive 2 and a negative 5, and then a negative 2 and a positive 5. So those are all the different ways I can multiply to negative 10, and I want to find the way that adds to a negative 3. So if I add these, I get negative 9, add these, I get positive 9. On this pair right here, here's my winner. If I add a positive 2 and a negative 3, that equals the negative 3 that I'm looking for. So that's the pair that works. X plus 2 and x minus 5. And again, just a quick check. If I multiply my first, I get my x squared. My outer, I get my negative 5x. My inner, I get my 2x. And then my last, I get the negative 10. Combine these, and there's my negative 3x. So I know I've done it correctly because when I distribute my factored form out, I get back to my original. And that's all there is for this video. There are a lot more examples, so if you come across any that are a little bit different and you'd like to see me work out, please be sure to send them my way.